Hi, and welcome to the History Lessons in Wikipedia World. Today, we are continuing with the Neolithic Revolution. This is part 5. In the previous lessons, just to have an overview, we talked generally about what were the major changes during this time. Then we went into the domestication of plants, how agriculture came to be, and later we went into farming that continued after agriculture. Also, in just the previous lesson, we talked about settlements, social organization, and trade. What is missing? What we're going to be talking about in this one: beliefs and the sacred and the rituals we know or think these people kept. Yes, we still don't have written evidence for this period, so, like before, most of the information we still have, what we have is from archaeological digs and anthropology and possible theories. We are also talking about a wide period and a wide range, geographically speaking. And we see also an evolution of a variety of rituals. They're different in different areas of the planet, but also they start evolving. We are going to see today from buried skulls to mounts, to dolmens, and even more complex structures as Stonehenge, all of which give us a certainty that these people believed in or had some kind of belief in power, in the afterlife, in something happening in the afterlife, after death. If not, they would not have started building all these constructions. What we're going to start with are the first remains that have been found in Neolithic settlements in the Middle East. We saw that there were a great deal of changes in society, and the belief system also reflects that, as we'll see. What we know and what has been found is that there were skulls buried underneath the houses. Archaeologists have found plastered skulls buried in pits underneath the house's floor, the floors of everyday living places. That means that A, they waited until the bodies had decomposed, then removed the head and modified it with plaster so it would resemble a living face, or at least a more human face than just a skull. They added, as you can see in the picture, they added the noses, the ears, and even put shells in the eyes so they would look like they were just sleeping. They were probably giving them another life, keeping them with them. It is also thought that these were periodically reburied. So when you had a ritual, there was maybe a specific moment during the year, harvest probably, they would, or if you were in dire moments, you would take out these skulls from when they were buried and probably perform some rituals. This has been called the Ancestor Cult. It's been found in many cultures. It is also deeply connected to the development of agriculture. can you guess why? Well, with agriculture, there is an increase of the sense of your territory, because that is the most important resource you have. And obviously, you have to protect it for the survival of your group. So before you moved around and that territory, maybe you had to fight with other groups, but you were mobile and you couldn't really put a claim on the area. Now you're fixed. And if you're fixed, you have to defend it, because that is what gives food to yourself, your children, and the rest of the group or tribe. What has to do with the skeletons then? Well, the skulls, sorry. Well, these beliefs and rituals that are based on keeping the skulls of the ancestors would probably create the idea that they are protecting the land, that it has been connected to the tribe or the clan for generations. This constructs a sense of belonging, that the stripe of land has been with that group of people generation after generation, and you just have this idea that it's been owned since the beginning of times, and thus it justifies the control of the group over it. It constructs this idea that that group has ownership on that piece of land. That's the importance that has been found in these skulls. We're changing from, yes, having some skulls buried during prehistoric times before agriculture. They keep on using this death cult, but they change it slightly. They adapt it to the needs they have with this new type of living. There are also other theories and other findings. For example, from the first prehistoric Venuses, there has been this theory with a continuation of finding other remains, like we see here, sculptures that continue this tradition. There are various historians that defend that the Neolithic societies were actually matriarchal, and they worshipped still mother goddess, a female goddess that worked through fertility. Fertility is very important if you're working with agriculture. Obviously, most goddesses or most gods that are associated with the land and agriculture are female. So it's believed that these gods, this god, would be actually goddesses at this time. But, and this is rather controversial, it's believed that it was only through invasion from Central Europe, where there were tribes that had developed more patriarchal societies, that when they came down south, they would conquer and impose their social structure and view on societies that were based more on women than on men previously. This is still a theory, but in some cases is as good as the others. We have pieces of evidence that point out that at this moment there was great emphasis in this female god. If that was the structure of the society, well, we are not sure. And talking about some other diversities, we have to say there are other possible belief systems that could have driven these first settlers. Others, for example, that have been seen with the Australian Aborigines are that they see humans just as one part of the whole world being a structure, and humans being part of it, not being separate and just using the land, but being connected to it. This is also an idea that is quite common with animism, that is found still to this day in Australia, Western Africa, and South American tribes. It is the idea of being one with nature, not being a disconnected entity. And said that, we cannot forget that even to this day, if you're walking throughout Europe, there are many stone constructions known as dolmens, that they were believed either to be burial sites sometimes or sacred places for rituals. We have also found burial mounds as proof of this belief in afterlife. You have these big burial places constructed sometimes for these important heads of the tribe, not for everyone, but that they convey this idea that the afterlife was important. And you not only have basic structures like these, but you start having incredible places like the famous Stonehenge. This is so complex for the time, not only the difficulty and how they brought all the stones, but how they positioned them, meaning that the knowledge of astronomy was getting deeper and deeper. These people were not only worshipping the sun, they were not just worshipping a fountain, they were starting to know a lot about the world they were living in. And another point to make is that these rituals were not done only by the villagers, like maybe before. They were part of them, in cases probably, but as we saw before, there were so much complex structures that required religious specialists. Most surely it all started still with the local shaman of the group that was probably being aided by these more relevant figures of the tribe, but as time passed, the religious needs became more and more elaborate, and that created rituals that were made to benefit the population, and these were needed to be performed by someone with either believed magical powers, expertise, knowledge specific on these magical and spiritual areas. And sometimes these rituals, you did not do them with the community as a group, but separate as something that had to be done apart from the village, but that it was needed in order to benefit it. And here's where druids, priests, and what we call sometimes witches or shamans started to come up, as we saw in the social structure. And this is the last bit of the lesson. I hope you enjoyed, and see you next time.